I talk a lot on this channel about how to recover from your chronic symptoms, but today I wanted to switch gears a little bit and tell you why I know, the lived experience that I had that led me to realizing that these are the tools that truly make lasting change when you deal with chronic symptoms, chronic illness, or chronic anxiety. It's because I've been through it. So I'm going to tell you a bit of my journey today so that maybe if you find some relatability in there, you'll know that if I can do it, you can too. Now, please remember, I'm not a doctor. This is my personal journey and what has helped me, and always consult your healthcare physician if you're dealing with something chronic. One common theme that I find with a lot of people who deal with chronic conditions is they do have a background of trauma or perfectionism or people pleasing, not being heard in childhood. There are patterns that develop over time that can lead to this, and that was certainly the case for me, but I'm not going to get into the details of my childhood because
we'd be here forever.
I want to fast forward to when the chronic symptoms really began to start for me. So I was in my early 20s. I was using alcohol a lot to cope with things. I was a very sensitive person, and alcohol just helped me feel more confident, better about myself, and like I didn't really have to deal with the pain that I had inside. I was also on an SSRI, and I had been on that SSRI since I was a young teenager because I was told this belief that got instilled in me that there was something wrong with my brain, and so I needed to take this pill in order to function normally. And even though personally the SSRI didn't do anything for me, I thought that I needed it, so I just kept taking it. But once I was in my early 20s, I decided, hey, I don't even understand why I've been on this pill all these years. I want to come off of it. So I went to my doctor. They put me on a 3-month scheduled taper plan, and I followed it to the T. And right when I was near the end of the taper, I got hit in the face hard with withdrawal symptoms. And those of you who have been through antidepressant or benzo withdrawal or any sort of prescription medication, you understand the hell that is.
And hell is putting it lightly.
So I didn't know at the time, but for the high dose that I was on, for the number of years that I was on it, weaning off over the course of 3 months was way too fast. And it hit me like a freight train. I was suffering all kinds of bizarre symptoms. I thought I was dying. I didn't know what was wrong with me. I ended up going to the emergency room, and they told me, oh, it's because you need this SSRI. You're supposed to be on it. This is just you without being on it, which wasn't true. It was actually withdrawal that I was suffering with, but I didn't know. And I refused to go back on the full dose of it because I really wanted to be off of it. But I negotiated and I went on half the dose that I was originally at. And then they also added on top of that a benzodiazepine. They told me to take that benzo daily, and so I did because I was so terrified experiencing what I was experiencing. And to be quite frank, I just wanted that nightmare to fucking end. Now, I didn't realize it at the time, but what I went through with that antidepressant withdrawal really traumatized my mind and my body. And I was shoving that down. I was not dealing with the trauma that caused. And taking the benzo really perpetuated that. I continued living my life, trying to drink to cope, eating, like a bunch of sugar all the time and junk food. That was just how I lived my life. I smoked a lot of pot. I really just was not in reality a lot of the time. And eventually my body started to speak. So the first stage of me starting to feel chronically ill started with IBS symptoms. I was always the girl who could eat whatever I wanted growing up, and suddenly that was not the case anymore. I started to get severe stomach cramping to the point that sometimes I would pass out. This scared me so bad that I knew that I had to do something about it. So I heard about a holistic nutritionist. I went to go see her. She put me on a whole new diet plan. I cut out things like pop and caffeine and sugar and junk food. And honestly, that actually helped my body feel a lot better. But I still got those stomach attacks coming and going. I began to live more in a state of fear, so I ended up getting a food sensitivity test. It came back showing like, hey, you're basically allergic to everything. And because I was living in fear, you can guess what happened next. I avoided so many foods. My list got more and more restricted over time, and it was not good for my body. I was living in a constant state of fear and hypervigilance. I was now dealing with the stomach issues still, along with panic attacks, anxiety, and some chronic pain starting to pop up here and there. Now, around this time, running with the theme of not accepting my body, I decided to get breast implants. What a wonderful idea in the middle of all this. So I went and I got breast implants. The surgery went okay, but the afterwards of the surgery was actually a bit traumatic because I got it done in a different country. They woke me up when I wasn't ready to wake up from the anesthesia yet, so I was really out of it. I couldn't even speak. They tossed me into a wheelchair and said, "See you later." And my husband had to drive out of the country with me, like barely being able to speak or talk. And that felt really scary. So that was a little bit of trauma added on to that. So yes, I had my breast implants. I was happy with them, but over time it started to not be good enough. I had all these self-esteem issues. I tried to drink and smoke pot to cope with it. Drinking got worse and worse because it was just messing up my stomach more. And every time I looked in the mirror, I still was not happy with myself. I was not accepting my body the way it was. And I was always thinking physically and mentally that something was wrong with me. If you catch my drift, this was a running theme for me over the years. Something is wrong with me. That was the message that I was sending to myself over and over and over again. As time passed, my then boyfriend at the time and I, we got a house together, we moved in, and I just started feeling really unwell all the time. I'm talking chronic fatigue, chronic pain, brain fog, stomach issues, anxiety, panic attacks, just not feeling well. And so I started digging for more answers, like what is going on with me? What's wrong with me? Let's solve the mystery. Let's fix this. Let's figure it out. Let's analyze it, which drove me further into that survival pattern. One day I came across an article about breast implant illness. People saying, hey, I got these breast implants and I started not feeling good and I got them removed. And now I'm feeling so much better. And so I thought, oh my God, that is totally me. Because I got the breast implants at the same time that this kind of chronic illness condition was starting to grow, I tied those together and I thought, this is what it is. It's the breast implants. At this point, I had had the implants for almost 5 years. And I thought, okay, all I have to do is remove these breast implants and it's gonna save my life. I'm gonna feel better. So I went down the rabbit holes in the Facebook groups and the Reddit forums and I found the best doctor possible. You know, they were saying, you can't just get your breast implants removed. You have to get them removed properly by a very skilled surgeon because if you don't, you will remain sick. More fear. So I did it. I flew to Costa Rica to go to the best of the best doctors to get my breast implants removed and got a fat transfer to my chest so that, you know, there wouldn't be nothing there. And it was a very crazy surgery. Not only the culture shock of being in a completely different country with my grandma there to take care of me, missing my boyfriend, the rest of my family, not really knowing, like, can I actually trust this? But trusting the words of other women that went before me. And it was very nerve-wracking. But the surgery itself took over 6 hours. There were some complications. It was a brutal surgery to recover from because not only was my chest recovering, which was actually the easy part, my legs had to recover because that's where they removed the fat from. And the bruising that I got on my legs, girl, I'm going to slide a picture in here. This was the bruising of my legs after the surgery, and this took a long time to recover from. Thankfully, I found a really skilled lymphatic drainage specialist who helped immensely with my legs. Shout out to Maddie. She was a lifesaver for that. But again, more trauma for my body to go through. Okay, so after I recovered from that surgery, I felt better. I was like, damn, okay. Yes, I'm doing better now. Like I'm free. I'm gonna be fine now. But that wasn't quite the case. As time went on, I started to feel shitty again. That chronic pain increased, that brain fog increased, that chronic fatigue increased, the overall unwell feeling like I was sick all the time, not knowing at the time that it was actually histamine building in my system. And I was thinking, damn, well, if I'm not feeling good again, like what is going on with me? Went back on the breast implant forums, went down the rabbit holes, tried to figure it out. A lot of people saying the word mold. If you had breast implants, you know, a lot of the saline ones end up growing mold in them. There was a tiny speck of mold in mine and I thought, that's it. It's mold. There was mold in my body. And then I read about how if there's any mold in your home, that's going to keep you sick as well. So I went down those mold rabbit holes and it's just led by so much fear, and I was so hypervigilant, literally sitting up for hours researching, trying to untangle these webs, trying to figure it out. And it was driving my illness deeper, but I didn't know that at the time. So I hired an integrative medicine specialist. She took me through a mold detox protocol. She told me I needed to spend thousands of dollars on this testing for my home to make sure there was absolutely no mold in there. And I did it, and it, of course, came back that there was mold in my home, even though I visibly couldn't see or smell anything. It told me, yep, there's mold in your home, and the specialist told me, you need to move and you need to get rid of every single thing that you own, or you will stay sick. This was so stressful. My husband, at the time boyfriend, and I loved that home. We bought it really cheap. We remodeled the whole thing. We had all new stuff in there. And then of course with me, like all my childhood belongings were there. And we thought, hey, we got to get rid of it all in order for you to survive, to feel better. So that's what we did. Once we sold that home, we were still looking for a place to live. So there was this awkward in between where we had to stay in a couple of apartments with little to no stuff because we had to buy all new stuff. And we were dropping thousands of dollars on testing these new homes that we would potentially live in. And again, living in fear, living in hypervigilance. It was so stressful. And if you've been down the mold rabbit hole, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It was so fucking stressful, trying to find the perfect place to live, trying to avoid mold 24/7, or I would remain sick. Honestly, it was a terrifying way to live. After testing home after home after home and all of them coming back with some level of mold, we got to the point where I just said, fuck this. We need somewhere to live. We can't be homeless forever. We have to live somewhere, and I just have to have the right mentality and do what it takes to heal. So we moved into a home, we got it professionally remediated, and I just decided that's that.
I'm not going to worry about this fucking mold anymore.
So we settled into our new home, and I thought I felt better, but again, symptoms came creeping back, and they got louder and louder as time went on, and I thought, oh my God, okay. Well, let's look back to when I went on that benzodiazepine. I knew it wasn't something that was good for my system. I knew it wasn't something that I should remain on forever. At this point, I had already been on it for 7 years. And I did not want to face coming off of it because of what I went through with the SSRI withdrawal. I was terrified. I peeped into the rabbit holes of the benzo world and coming off benzos for a minute, and it scared the living shit out of me. And so that's why I avoided it for 7 years. But I decided it was time to face this huge demon because I just wanted to feel better. So my husband and I, we made a plan, of course, after I researched a ton and went down more rabbit holes to do with benzo withdrawal and saw things that scared the shit out of me and drove that fear deeper. We made a very careful taper plan. We were planning to take 1 to 2 years to taper off. We did a liquid taper, and we actually used a blind taper method. If you want to know more about my benzo story, you can find it in this video by scrolling on my YouTube. I tell the full story about coming off benzos there. Once I was about 65% off of the benzos, I actually ended up pregnant, and this threw another wrench in the system. I wasn't planning to be pregnant. I was terrified of being pregnant because I did not trust my body. But I was super lucky to have a very supportive partner who had the belief in me that I could do it. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to do this. We paused the taper of the benzos so that I wouldn't be going through any more withdrawal symptoms, and I focused on my pregnancy. And on that time of my pregnancy, I actually came across hypnotherapy and dealing with the subconscious mind, and that really intrigued me. I joined a program called Hypno Babies. I applied it to my life. I did hypnosis meditations for 45 minutes every single day, and something crazy began to happen. I began to feel really good. I began to form a trust with my body at that time. I began to have an amazing pregnancy. And it changed my outlook on everything. I felt like I can do this, I can have a baby, and dare I even say that I enjoyed being pregnant. So my journey with visualizing in the mind and hypnosis really started there, and I obviously fell in love with it because it helped me so much. Now, We get to the postpartum chapter where I had my baby. It was a very traumatic birth for me, and the recovery was very traumatic. And postpartum for the first like 8 months was very traumatic for me as well. So I really struggled in those first 8 months. The lack of sleep really got to me. It was obviously a big impact and a lot more stress on my body. I really spiraled for a while, but once I was about a year postpartum, my husband started to wean me off the benzo again slowly, which I didn't know, which you can listen to in my benzo recovery journey if you want to know more about that. But he slowly started to wean me again, and over time I started to notice that the anxiety that had gone away once I was pregnant and kind of like recovered postpartum started to creep back up, but it was like a different kind of anxiety. It wasn't an anxiety for a reason. It was just kind of there. It was more of like a physical anxiety. And I kept thinking something is really off. Something feels really wrong. And so I started to ask my husband, hey, like, have you been weaning me from the benzos again? Because like something is weird. Something's going on. Like something doesn't feel right. And he kept saying, you don't want me to tell you. You don't want me to tell you, which was our agreement. But I kept poking at him and saying, like, just let me know, like something is going on and I need to know. And he revealed to me, like, hey, you're actually off them. You've been off them for a few weeks now. When he told me that, it shocked my nervous system. It really shocked me. I wasn't expecting it. And that just, the match that lit the flame. It honestly was. I just started having back-to-back panic attacks all the time. I started looping all the time. I started getting all these bizarre symptoms. And I knew that that anxiety that was slowly creeping up over the weeks was actually because I had been off the benzos and my nervous system was struggling. I started suffering from all these bizarre symptoms that I had never had before, which just drove the fear deeper, completely shattered any trust that I built in my body and my brain, and I just lost myself. It was a very, very dark time. I'm not going to go over the symptoms that I had again. Go ahead and watch my benzo video if you want to know more about that. But it was a very, very challenging and difficult time. And I would say it took me about a year and a half to start to feel like myself again and stabilize. So after that year and a half, I started to feel like myself again. I was working again. I was doing okay, you know, but I had shoved a lot of what I had been through back there and kept saying, I'll deal with that later. I'm doing okay. I'm finally not feeling anxious all the time or having panic attacks. And so I just want to live my life. Like I just want to like not deal with it. And so that's what I did. And over the course of the next year and a half, I kind of just lived. And unfortunately, during that time, my body started to speak very physically again. I started getting these weird migraines, brain fog, vision changes. I started getting all these histamine type issues, hives, itching. I started reacting to things. I just was really feeling unwell again, and I noticed it would come and go in waves, and I thought, okay, I got to figure this out. I got to fix this. I started analyzing and solving again and looking at my body as like a project to solve or a puzzle to solve because something was wrong with me. Now, a lot of my symptoms were sinus related, and I ended up seeing an ear, nose, and throat specialist who told me you have a severely deviated septum. It's best if you fix this, it'll help your sinuses. And I thought, okay, if I get this deviated septum fixed, then I'm going to be able to breathe better. My sinuses won't be bugging me all the time. Not realizing that like the sinus issues were actually because of my mast cell issues, not because of the deviated septum itself. And I thought if I fix the deviated septum, then I'm going to fix these sinus issues. I'm going to sleep better. I'm going to have way less brain fog. My vision will be better, all this stuff. So I was like, all right, let's do this. Let's have the surgery. I was feeling mentally good enough to have the surgery. I was feeling confident. I didn't feel like worried about it or anything. It was supposed to be a pretty simple surgery. So I went in to have the surgery, and at first everything went well. You know, everything was normal. It really sucked not being able to breathe through your nose, having these stents shoved up your nose, but that was only supposed to be for 3 days. And I was reading about all these posts about people getting the stents removed and then being able to take that first breath through their nose and their life changing. And I was like, yes, this is going to be me. So 3 days later, when I went back to the surgeon to get those stents removed, she removed them, and
I couldn't breathe.
I literally could not breathe at all through my nose, not even one little bit. And she thought that was kind of odd. And she was like, well, just give it some time. Maybe like, you know, it'll clear up in a couple days. So I gave it time. Still couldn't breathe. I could not breathe for weeks. It was stuck like that. There was absolutely no air coming in through my nose. And it's not like when you have a cold. There's still a little bit of air coming in through your nose on and off. It was literally completely blocked, which sucks because you constantly have to mouth breathe. Your mouth gets dry right away. You can't sleep. I had to sleep sitting up all the time. It was really, really stressful to go through. And I ended up going to see the surgeon again. She looked up in my nose. She said, oh, you have a bunch of blood clots up there blocking your breathing. So she went up there with some tools, no painkillers involved, and scraped them out. And goddamn, that was one of the most painful things that I had ever been through. And even after she scraped them out, I could only breathe through a tiny little pinhole in one nostril. And she said,
give it a couple days, it'll clear up.
Try to, really inhale, do your sinus rinses, like you'll be fine. My body was so stressed. I was lacking sleep. I was lacking breathing and oxygen to my brain. Like it was a lot. And it took a few days, but eventually after some severe pain in my nose cleared. And I was so happy. And I was like, oh, the battle is finally over. I can breathe through my nose. It felt so good to be able to breathe again. I went a couple days like that. And then one evening, my nose started dripping blood. And I was like, oh, I'm getting a nosebleed. Okay. Just took it in stride, decided to take care of my nosebleed, and more blood started coming. And then more blood, and then more blood. And it was literally like a horror scene, like blood just gushing out of my nose, literally coming out of my mouth, just blood. Like I thought these breast implants and it's gonna save me. Something is severely wrong. Obviously, we went to Emerge. They shoved a bunch of stuff up my nose, a bunch of gauze to try and stop the bleeding, and it just would not stop. No matter what they did, the bleeding would not stop. During this time, my household actually had been hit with a pretty severe virus. It might have been the big C virus, not sure, but it was severe. So I was very weak while healing from this surgery and the virus. And now I was losing these copious amounts of blood. And I felt like I was going to pass out and throw up at the same time. It was just a lot to go through. On top of that, my dog, he's a senior and he started getting really sick. He was vomiting and pooping everywhere, but it was like very bloody, like copious amounts, very worrisome. And we really thought like, this is it. He's dying of something. He's gonna be gone. So that was another layer on top of it. It was just like my nervous system was like,
fuck this.
But I held on. I was proud of myself. I had one panic attack in the emergency room. I got through it pretty quickly and I was like, yeah, like I'm unbeatable. I ended up going to the surgeon the next day. She had to cauterize the wound in my nose so it would stop bleeding. And then I went on my merry way. My dog thankfully fully recovered and he did well after a couple days of spending his time in the vet emergency room. He bounced back, which thank God, because I don't know what I would have done if I actually lost him at that time. And then I started to recover as well, but I had a lot of like weird symptoms again. I was just like not feeling well after everything that I had been through, but I picked myself up. I'm like, we got to move on with life. Let's just keep going. About 3 weeks after those complications ended, I was in my luteal phase and I started to feel exceptional anxiety, like a bigger amount of anxiety than I had felt in a very long time. Other than that post-surgery drama, I felt a lot of anxiety. I was very on edge. Like I just felt very off and I was like, oh, it's just a rough luteal phase, whatever. When my period comes, I'll feel better. My period came, it didn't go away. In fact, I actually started to feel a little bit worse. And I was like, oh, well, it's just my period. When my period goes away, I'll feel better. My period went away and I still didn't feel better. In fact, I continued to feel worse. I had really, really thick brain fog. I was itching everywhere. I was having stomach aches, migraines, sinus issues. It was like everything that I had been feeling for the last couple years all of a sudden reached a head and exploded. And it really did explode. I started having back-to-back panic attacks again. I felt really bizarre, really off, and I was thinking, what the fuck is wrong with me? I actually ended up getting diagnosed with mast cell hypersensitivity. That was actually an issue that I had been dealing with for a long time, which I didn't realize. I ended up going through bouts of PMDD, which was really difficult. And it was just really bizarre to me because I had felt like I had been through the benzo withdrawal, the protracted withdrawal, that year and a half of hell. I felt like I was right back there again, but with a bunch of other physical symptoms added on top. And so it was like very shocking and traumatizing to feel that way again when I thought that I was on the other side of it. Looking back now, I know that it was just my allostatic load had built up so far from an already fragile nervous system. Given everything that I had been through with the surgery and my dog and the virus and everything that was going on, then it was just a breaking point for me. And the mast cell issues that were trying to speak to me, the way my body was trying to speak to me over the years, just shouted. And I have been on a recovery journey from that point ever since. Now this video is getting kind of long. I've told you the majority of my story, but we're now at the turning point where I finally found the exact answers that I needed to heal. I actually had them all along, but I didn't realize it. And it just changed everything for me. I'm gonna make a second video. Please comment part 2 down below if you want to hear what actually changed for me, how I discovered how I was gonna heal, and how I actually started healing from all the years of this shit. Also, let me know, have you experienced chronic pain, chronic fatigue, mast cell issues, histamine issues, PMDD, hormonal issues, hair loss, fatigue, anxiety, panic attacks, migraines, any of that stuff? Has that been part of your story? Because if so, my heart goes out to you. That is not easy. Stay tuned for part 2 because this is the part that matters the most out of everything.